That's awesome.
Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the info session that is in partnership with Global Spark and the Center for Global Engineering. And we're so pleased to have you join us with our speakers today. So my name is Moni, and I will be one of the speakers today that will be speaking at the end. But I wanted to just provide a chance to give you an overall agenda, and then each of our speakers will have a chance to introduce themselves. So as we get started, I will share our deck, and just a few housekeeping notes there's a live transcription. So if you need accommodations for that, you can enable it and the subtitles will come on. The second note is we will have a live question and answer. There's half of this webinar is dedicated to hear directly from you. So if you have questions, anything burning, any confusing, any worries, you have a chance to kind of voice them and allow the responses from our panelists as well. So do have the opportunity to send your comments in the chat or be able to also share verbally on live. So our agenda today is really to cover the 4 areas in which we'll have 4 different speakers. So we will start with an overview of the Reach Alliance and the Reach process, as well as then hearing why should engineers care about reaching the last mile. And then we'll have Natalie share about her student experience to date. And I will cover at the end about the details of if you're interested to learn more and to apply to be part of our research cohort next year, we'll cover some of those details as well. So we will start our webinar today with our Executive Director, Mcleod, to start us off.
Thank you so much, Moni, and thank you to Natalie and Ahmed for being here and for everyone that's joined us here for the live version of this webinar. We're just super excited to chat with you all. As you can imagine, engineers make up a really critical part of our researcher and our faculty mentor cohort. And so we're really glad to have Natalie here to speak to that experience as a student researcher, and then Ahmed to speak to the mentorship component. I'll provide some opening remarks to give you a little bit more information about what the Reach Alliance is and how that looks from the standpoint of student experience. And Moni, next slide, please. Thank you. So Reach was really born out of the Sustainable Development Agenda, and in particular SDG 1. So end poverty in all its forms everywhere. The SDGs are quite unequivocal in their aim, which is to leave no one behind. And that's really something that is at the heart of all of the case study research that we do from beginning to end. And you'll see some examples throughout this presentation, but I think that's an important starting point to really understand what the initiative is all about. This quote, disaggregate the data, and we find that our statistical national successes are masking moral and practical failures. People are left behind simply because they live in rural communities, urban slums, in conflict zones, as part of Indigenous groups with disabilities, or simply because they're girls. So this was Anthony Lake from UNICEF. And this quote really actually was the origin for the research question that we ask here at Reach, which is how do we understand how it is that we deliver important goods and services to the last mile? And so these groups here that are being called out by Anthony Lake are just some of the community groups that we focus on, but I do think they provide some really salient examples. Next slide, Moni. So we were founded in 2015 here at the University of Toronto, and we are a partnership with the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth and have been since the beginning. As I mentioned, we are inspired by the Sustainable Development Goals. And at the heart, what we are is a student-driven, faculty-mentored research and leadership initiative that examines how critical interventions and innovations reach those that are hardest to reach. So we have a real focus on the last mile or most marginalized, or sometimes called invisible population. We're less focused on standard development interventions, but really looking at those that are getting at that last mile population. Our research has been featured all around the world in leading outlets such as The Lancet, the Bulletin for WHO, lots of other peer-reviewed journals, the Stanford Social Innovation Review, the Globe and Mail, Toronto Star. We really have a deep focus on knowledge translation mobilization, which I'll speak to in a moment here, but you can check out the case studies on the link here if you're interested in learning more. And this slide gives you a sense for the topic areas that we've covered, as well as the geographic nature of our research. So as you can see, we have a really wide range in terms of the topics that we cover. I know the slide is, the font on the slide is extremely small, so you'll have to zoom in at home once you get the deck. But ultimately, the interesting thing here is to look at all of the different country case studies that we've looked at. So we're really interested in understanding how to reach the hardest to reach all around the world, and then translating those insights from one part of the world to another, essentially acting as a knowledge broker, you might say. You'll also notice that there are three institutional icons here, and I think this is an important thing to note. So while we were founded here at the University of Toronto, we are actually undergoing expansion to 6 more universities around the world. So currently we have a partnership with in Mexico with Tec de Monterrey, and in the UK with University College London and Oxford. I'm actually in London right now visiting our partners here. And then we are building out relationships in Africa and Asia as we speak, and hope to be able to announce those new schools joining our network. But just to say, this is really a global community of researchers that are all motivated by the question, how to reach the hardest to reach and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. So our vision, as I've already mentioned, really is investigating how to get important stuff to everyone everywhere. Now, the reason important stuff is in square brackets there is because we couldn't find one word to fill that gap. So it's about products, it's about services. And as you'll see from our website and from looking more deeply into the case study topics, and as I'm sure Natalie and Ahmed will speak to here, we look at things like cash, energy, vaccines, birth registration, formal identification. Really, any type of essential good and service is fair game for the Reach Alliance, as long as it's focused on a last mile or hard to reach population. Our mission is to pursue the full achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals by equipping and empowering the next generation of global leaders to create knowledge and inspire action. So really, you are our mission. The students that go through this program are the change makers. They are our greatest asset. We put all of our time and energy and resources, as do our faculty and our coaching staff, into the students that are going through this program. We seek to uncover innovative programs that are reaching the hardest to reach, then to produce actionable development intelligence and actionable research insights, to provide students with the training and skills so that when they come out of the Reach program, they're really equipped to take on a leadership role. Our goal is to really position you for impact after you come out of this intensive experience. And then ultimately, our goal is to inform global development discussions through our research insights. We aim to position these in various publications, as I've mentioned, as well as at the Reach Symposium, which I'll speak more about in a moment. To date, we've had 172 students of all levels, undergraduate, graduate, and PhD students, go through our initiative. We have 23 case studies and about 20 more that are currently in production. So we are undergoing an extensive scale up at the moment. And as I mentioned, we do have 4 university partners in total at the moment, with another 3 to be joining us by the end of the year. As you can imagine, equity, diversity, and inclusion is at the heart of all of the work that we do, from the recruitment of our students and faculty through to the case studies that we work on, and every step in between in terms of the research process. Our work is guided by these principles here on the right-hand side: diversity, belonging, equity, deserving, solidarity, accountability, and excellence. And the last point I think is extremely, extremely important, just because for us, the diversity, equity, and inclusion piece of our work is really driving the excellence of the work and the outputs that we produce. So Reach underwent a 5-month consultative process with our entire community, so including our students, our alumni, our faculty, our staff. And we worked closely with Jody Glean, who's the director of the Anti-Racism and Cultural Diversity Office. And through that process, we co-created a charter. And I encourage you actually to go and take a look at that document. It's just 2 pages, and it'll really speak well, I think, to the vision that we have for achieving equity, diversity, and inclusion in all of our work, as well as some of the tangible commitments that we make here every day to advance that agenda. As I've already briefly spoken to, knowledge translation and impact is a key piece of our work. So the research process itself is, and I hate to say this because I know many of you are students focused on research, it's about half of the game. The other half is what happens after you actually do the research. So that's the case study writing process that you undertake. And then it's also the other knowledge translation deliverables and opportunities that you take up to basically get that information into the hands of policymakers, practitioners that can actually do something with it. So at Reach, we are all about doing research that is positioned for impact and that can be taken up by various stakeholders. Certainly the publications are a big component of that agenda and strategy, but then also producing things that are a little bit more accessible for different stakeholder groups. So for example, sometimes we're trying to reach policymakers, so we find op-eds to be an effective tool. Sometimes we're trying to reach practitioners and they often really appreciate videos, so we also produce a video from each of our case studies. The deliverable here, Women's Economic Empowerment in Jalisco, Mexico, that is a cover of one of our case studies, our recent case studies. And so it just gives you a sense for what the final output actually looks like. We engage with professional editors and designers, and half of our team, actually half of our full-time staff team, are communications professionals. So it really does, I think, demonstrate that we have put our money where our mouth is, and that this knowledge translation and mobilization is an extreme priority for us, as we feel it's essential to actually achieving our mission and getting that research into a position where it can actually advance the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the Reach Symposium is a really exciting milestone and flagship event that we have every year. It typically happens in the spring. It's actually coming up on April 21st and 22nd, and I encourage you to check out our social handles and our website for more details. It's a public event. This is the first time ever that we've actually opened this to folks outside of the Reach Alliance community. So great news for all of you that may be interested in learning more about what it is that we do here at Reach. The event brings together leaders from the public, private, civil society sectors. And then, of course, the Academy is really the backbone of this event, where we bring our researchers, our faculty, to share the latest actionable insights that they've delivered. So I won't spend much time going through these details. You can all see these outputs here on the slide. But I think what's interesting is just take a look at some of our speakers. All of the videos from last year's sessions are now available on our website. So if there's someone that's jumping out to you or one of the topics that's really of interest, I encourage you to take a look at that video and maybe learn a little bit more about the perspective that our speakers and our alumni bring to the event. Now, the last thing I will speak to before I hand it over is the program itself. So if you're a student going through Reach, what does that look like? And I'm really going to be leaning on Natalie, especially in her section of the presentation, to give you more detailed, nuanced overview of this process. But I did want to just highlight the key components here for you now. The program itself is about 12 to 16 months in length. So students are recruited obviously now. The case study pitch process goes on over the course of the summer, and then the program research really begins in the fall term. The reason that there's a bit of a deviation there in terms of how long the case study process goes on for is because after the case study report is produced, many of the teams do work, and sometimes this is one or two of the students, but do work to produce additional knowledge outputs. So for example, an op-ed or a video. So sometimes we see students engage beyond the life cycle of their project, but really the only actual deliverable that we require is that case study report. So just to clarify, that is the final output. Anything over and above is really optional and certainly decided by the team and the faculty. Faculty mentors support students to select case study topics that are relevant to the student's interest. And again, these are case studies focused on the hardest to reach. So we encourage students to engage with partners, as well as get informed through their faculty or their coursework and identify these projects. And they actually go through this intensive pitching process. And that's really how we select the case studies. We get a lot of questions about how the case studies are selected, and it is really student driven. But certainly some of the ideas are coming from other stakeholders in our community, like partner organizations and faculty. But it is a very student-led process. The first thing in terms of the research that happens is the secondary research. So that's the literature review. So once your case study idea has been selected, you start to think about what is the research question that will drive you for this next year. And that's where you dive into the literature. So you read everything and anything that you can get your hands on about your case study project. That prepares you for the ethics application, which is submitted in December and sometimes January. At that point, once your ethics is approved, you begin the primary research. So that is the field interviews. For the last 3 cohorts, unfortunately, because of COVID, teams have not been able to travel to the field. We obviously are optimistic about travel for next year, but again, it will be very much dependent on guidance from the University of Toronto. So I encourage you to really follow the Centre for International Experience, as that is where those updates are coming from. It's actually not a decision from the Reach side, but rather from the Centre for International Experience in the institution more broadly. Once that research is complete, teams author these case study reports in collaboration with faculty mentors. They then go through the professional copy editing process. And then, as I mentioned, the designer will then take that and produce a laid out version of the report. And those are all available on our website to give you some examples of what those documents look like. And then, as I mentioned, that other knowledge translation deliverables are also an option. And we certainly have staff and capacity to support teams that are interested in taking their research to the next step. There were 3 other pieces here: team performance coaching, skills development, and the alumni network, that really underpin the program. So you can think of those initial bullets as the program itself. And these are the other, if you want to think of that as sort of a vertical, and then these are kind of horizontal elements that are also happening in tandem to the research process, but really enrich the experience. And personally, I feel like differentiate Reach from many of the opportunities that are available to students at the University of Toronto. So the first being that team performance coaching. Each of the teams is paired with a dedicated professional performance coach from the outset of their project through to the final completion of their case study. What that looks like is individual meetings with a performance coach, as well as meetings with the team and the performance coach. And the ultimate aim here is that we want to have the team performing at their highest possible potential, but also being able to develop some skills around sort of governance, meeting agenda setting, organization, and really sort of professional skills that we have students then hopefully take into the workforce after they finish with Reach. The skills development series is a series that's delivered by faculty, many from the University of Toronto, as well as expert consultants that we bring in for certain topic areas. These session topics cover: how do you create a research question? How do you do research ethics applications? How do you conduct qualitative interviews? How do you write for Reach case study reports? And just in general, tips on how to do proper writing. There's a full range of session topics that we curate for the students, and these are really meant to support the experience so that students feel equipped to handle each of the milestones throughout that 12 to 16 month process. Lastly, the Global Alumni Network. We've actually made quite a number of developments on this front in the last number of months. So we've recently launched an exclusive portal for Reach alumni, so you can only log in if you have published a case study report with Reach. Access to exclusive jobs, event opportunities, just general networking with students from Oxford, the University College London, Tech de Monterey, and of course soon to be 3 more partners. In addition to that portal, we've also created a global networking platform which pairs students using, it's AI enabled, and pairs students up with other students that are also interested in similar or different skills and kind of gaining more experience and really connecting you to people in the network. Awesome. So I've spoken to this slide mostly in the previous, but we do just like to have it visually represented because I am personally a visual learner. I think some of you in the engineering space may also be, but essentially it just paints the picture of the life cycle of that program. So as I mentioned, you've got that recruitment that's happening now, the case study identification, which is going on over the course of the summer, and those look like weekly meetings with the full cohort. So it is something to be aware of, that there is a time commitment that will start for you in June if selected for this year's cohort. That secondary research goes on from September to typically January, although of course you're going to be referring to the literature, for the duration of your research experience. But really the focused effort is September to January as you prepare for your research ethics board application. Then the primary research begins February and runs usually through to May, just depending on when your ethics application is approved. And then the final case study reports are due at the end of June, so June 30th, and it is a hard deadline for our own funder. So that's sort of why we have that deadline in place. And then the aim is beyond that June 30th deadline, you're working with the editor to finalize the document and then potentially produce other knowledge translation products that may accompany and further substantiate your research. All right, I think that's, is that it for me, Moni, I believe? So
Yes.
I can hand it over to Ahmed then. So Ahmed has been a faculty mentor with Reach. I think, Ahmed, you've maybe done 3 or 4 case study teams now. You're a seasoned mentor. And I encourage you to check out Ahmed's case studies. You can look up his profile on the leadership page of our website, and it actually will link you to the different projects that Ahmed's mentored all around the world, all of which have had a very clear link to engineering. So Ahmed, over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Marian, and thanks, Moni, for organizing this. I'm sort of the Reach guy in engineering, and I still remember when Kirsten, who's Marian's predecessor, reached out to me back, I want to say in 2016, asking me to advertise what was then a singular Reach project. And here we are, you know, advertising this massive alliance with, I don't know, over a dozen projects. So it's so great to see how far we've come. And you know, the reason why I'm such a staunch advocate of Reach is because I know it's something that's incredibly valuable for engineering students to consider and to pursue. So I'll tell you maybe a little bit about myself. Very quickly, I want to make sure that Natalie gets the center stage because she's, you'll probably find it easiest to relate to her. So my name is Ahmed Mahmoud. I'm an engineer by profession, like hopefully all of you. I'm also the program manager for the Center for Global Engineering, or CGEN, here at U of T. We are a research center that catalyzes and supports research and student engagement in international development. We think about problems like food insecurity, energy poverty, water, sanitation, and so on. We do that through participatory on-the-ground research projects, through capstone projects that some of you might be interested in. And we'll be posting those very soon for people going to their 4th year. We teach a number of courses, including one which I teach, APS 420. I'll talk about that in a second. And we have a fellowship program as well. We just closed the call for applications last month, but if you'll be around next year, we have a call every year for it's basically like a summer fellowship where we pair you up with an organization that's doing social impact work. As I just mentioned, I do teach a course which is ongoing this semester, and I can see some of my students here in the attendees. And the course basically examines the role and barriers of technology in global development and poverty alleviation. Next slide. And one of the things that we talk about a lot in this course is this issue where you have 90% of the world's designers and engineers focusing on, you know, what we call the top of the pyramid, the wealthiest people in the world. Moni, can you, yeah, I think there's an animation. Yes, there you go. Then we typically visualize poverty in the world using this income pyramid, where you have over 1 billion people living on less than $1 a day. I don't know how accurate this number is today, but the point of this is to show you that the unfortunate reality is that very few designers and engineers think about how to design products and services for the base of the pyramid. And as a result, those people tend to end up with the most unreliable and most relatively expensive products that the market has to offer. Meanwhile, you know, people at the tippy top of the pyramid are catered to, and that's where a lot of attention, engineering attention, goes. Next slide. Now, as it turns out, a lot of engineers, there's this nascent movement called global engineering. We have engineers who have been trying to think about how they can apply their innovation, their aspects of novelty and engineering rigor to tackle some of those challenges. And that has given rise to this practice known as appropriate technology. And these are just some examples. You know, the one on the top right, the solar thermal rice cooker. It's this very simple parabolic dish that concentrates heat on a pot, so you can boil water, you can cook rice. it's a good alternative for people who live in areas where they might not have ready access to fuel or other kinds of ways to keep themselves warm or to cook food or boil water. Next slide. And here at CGen, we do a lot of research focused on the same things. You know, some of you, if you know about CGen, you may have heard of the Reinvent the Toilet program here, which has been ongoing since 2011, and it's basically looking at designing a better toilet that's waterless, that uses little energy, that's easy to maintain. And we're actually in the process of seeing how this could be scaled up. One thing that I'm working on right now, I'm going to go off script for a second here, but we are right now putting together a very large grant in the double-digit $1 million range to scale up fortified salt in sub-Saharan Africa. So one of the key innovations that came out of CGen was a method to fortify salt with iodine and iron. Now, as it stands, the salt that you consume, the table salt that you consume is iodized. But one of our profs here has figured out a way to also add iron to that. Now, this may seem simple in practice, but it's not a matter of just, sprinkling some shavings of iron into the salt. It's a very complex chemical engineering process, and it's been very successful. It was trialed in India, and now we are looking to scale it up in sub-Saharan Africa. And one of the key aspects of the application that we're looking at right now is Reach. It's literally called the Reach section of the proposal, and this is a Global Affairs Canada proposal. So increasingly, we're seeing donors and funders and people, the powers that be, ask innovators to think about how their technology can reach those who are hard to reach. Next slide. And the reason why we think about this is because obviously you can design great technologies, but when you think about communities that are extremely remote, this is often how they get goods and services. Yeah, and one of those pictures is one that I took in Nepal from a few years ago. But for people who live in mountainous areas, goods and services are literally carried by somebody on their back, of 1 vertical kilometer to where they live. So it's not quite the same as it is here, where anywhere in Ontario you can probably get something using Amazon Prime in 2 days. In some places where people might not have fixed addresses, in some places where people are marginalized, certain castes, certain genders, certain groups of people, they don't receive that same level of access that we have. Next slide. The other reason why we like to think about Reach is because even though the world has made some incredible strides in improving things like access to water, energy, food, and education, there exists this massive inequality across the whole world. So this graph here shows you primary school enrollment across different countries, and you could see that there's some countries reached universal enrollment as early as the 1900s, and there are a lot of countries that are just now catching up, and other countries across sub-Saharan Africa, like Niger, where they haven't even gotten to the 3/4 mark yet. So on a moral level, we need to think about how do we reach that remaining 40%, and even for countries that have reached 99% enrollment, how do you reach that last remaining 1%? Next slide. And even if you look within countries, countries like India, where you might have a very high primary enrollment figure, once you break down or disaggregate, as Maren mentioned, the data, you'll find gross inequalities, especially along gender lines, and you'll find certain marginalized groups that are severely left behind. Next slide. Another issue is we don't necessarily think too much about policy, but a lot of the interventions that move the needle in terms of alleviating poverty and creating inclusive societies focus on clever policies. Unfortunately, due to corruption, in a lot of cases, those in a lot of cases, those policies don't actually achieve their intended impact. And here I give you the example of India's public distribution system, which is a system that delivers staples and crucial supplies to marginalized populations. And it's a very good system at reaching people who are hard to reach. Unfortunately, because of corruption, so much of that money gets leaked out. So you'll find that, of the 100%, for every dollar that India puts into the PDS, only 28 cents actually reach people at the bottom of the pyramid in terms of the subsidies that they put towards that program. Next slide. And the last thing, this is stolen from Joe Wong's slides, is the challenge of invisibility. In so many low-income countries, people might not have IDs or birth certificates or driver's licenses or even fixed addresses. And as a result, it makes it very hard for policymakers, for innovators, for entrepreneurs to figure out how they can service people at the bottom of the pyramid, and how to cater some of those technologies in order to address the problems that we're focused on here. Next slide. So I've been, like Maren mentioned, I've been with Reach for a few years now, and I helped supervise, I think, 3 projects so far, and overseeing one this year as well. And I have to tell you, every one of those projects has been an incredible experience, not just for the students, but also for me. I get to learn a lot myself. And the way my approach to those projects is, because it's a multidisciplinary team, I don't get to tell the students exactly what they should do. Rather, I recognize that in a multidisciplinary team, some students want to approach the problem in a quantitative way, others in a qualitative way. Some may be interested in gender inequalities, others may be interested in financial aspects of the project. No matter what, we try to make sure that our students get the opportunity to approach their project however way they like. So as an example, in 2019, I helped supervise a team that was looking at M-Pesa, which is a mobile money service in Kenya, has had an incredible impact at improving financial inclusion across the country. It's basically a service using phones that can allow you to transact and save money and buy insurance. And it's something that has had a huge impact in the country. So we went off to try to understand exactly who are the people who have been, well, first of all, what impact has M-Pesa had on the people who are typically hard to reach? And then of the people who have not yet been reached, what can M-Pesa do to bite off that last chunk of the population that's still left behind? And Maren just posted in the chat, you can watch a video that summarizes the study. I won't talk about the study itself, but rather the process that we went through. Because we were trying to understand exactly who are the people who are still left behind, we had to do a quantitative analysis, and the students did an incredible job of digging into very dense surveys on financial inclusion in the country. And then they put together these sophisticated regression models to try to find correlations between certain demographic or geographic variables and the lack of financial exclusion rather. So they were able to produce something that was good enough to publish in a journal paper, and indeed we did submit that paper to a journal. And besides that, the students today, because of the knowledge that they gained, they're I think they're in McKinsey, at CDL Creative Destruction Lab, and we have one student Stanford, one student Yale. You just get so much out of the Reach program. I think Maren sort of glossed over the training that you go through, but I think it deserves probably half the slide deck should focus on that, because you get so much out of it. You learn about ethnography, how to analyze data, what's good data, what's bad data, quantitative, qualitative research. So many things that when you're looking for a job later on, or when you're applying for grad school, will be invaluable. So I really hope that this convinces you, if you weren't already convinced, that this is worthy of your time. And I'll hand it over now to Natalie, who will tell you a bit about her firsthand experience with Reach.
Thank you, Ahmed.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. So yeah, my name is Natalie. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an Indie 2T2+1 with minors in Indigenous Studies and in Latin American Studies. But before I get into like my experience at Reach, I did want to start off with some context, both personally and in context of the research. So I grew up moving between Toronto and Ecuador, where my parents are from. And this has completely, I think, shaped the way I see the world and why I was interested in Reach. So on the top right, there's a picture of an Indigenous-led protest, some women in Ecuador. These are the kind of protests I was seeing on the news growing up in Ecuador, and I think is where I first was exposed to like the inequitable structures that create those hardest to reach populations that we've been talking about so far. And then just, we're gonna fast forward 10 years, but another kind of experience of mine that has really shaped like me as a person is a member of the Toronto Youth Reconciliation Initiative when I was in first year, where I learned about Indigenous worldviews and struggles and how community-led activism can actually help us tackle this. And the reason I'm telling you kind of these random tidbits of my life is because these experiences have really contributed to some of my values, which I would say the top three are community, innovation, and interdisciplinarity. And those values are what really brought me to Reach, because I felt that Reach really reflects those values in the program. So that's just a little bit of context about me. Thanks, Bonnie. Next slide. Just if you're curious about my the research I'm doing, I'm actually not going to talk about this too much in this presentation. Actually, I'm going to talk a lot more about kind of the extra things that you get to do at Reach in terms of personal development, but did want to share quickly about my research. So my team and I are working on a case study that it's a little bit unique because we're actually doing it in partnership with a university in Mexico. And we're hoping to build on the work of the students at that university with respect to artisanal family businesses in a region of Mexico called Tequila. So this is the research question that we're asking. It's, to what extent do family businesses, business models contribute to business sustainability and strengthen the market position of local artisanal businesses in Tequila? I know that's a mouthful, but just to unpack it a little bit, Tequila, as you might imagine, is a region that is most known for being the place where that drink comes from, tequila. And so there's a really big industry of tequila there and also tequila tourism. So we're curious to know like how that industry impacts these artisanal family businesses that are trying to also like reach these tourists. And specifically, we want to know if the fact that they are family businesses it gives them any opportunities that something like a corporate business model in the tequila industry might not. So on this slide, I just have a picture of where the research is located in Mexico. And then the picture of below is embroidery, which is one of the products that one of the family businesses we're looking at actually makes. So next slide, please. Okay, so now I'll get into the researcher experience. I'm talking about my experience and what I think has been most valuable here. And the way I want to kind of frame this before I kind of get into it is, for me, this experience has really been about the people at Reach. So before I was at Reach, I was a member of Engineers Without Borders. I imagine some of you hopefully are familiar with it. And at that club, we had this value called invest in people. And this is a value that's always resonated with me and I think is really embodied by Reach. And it's what I feel I'm getting out of this program. Like Reach is really investing in me and my growth. The reason I believe this is possible is because there's a strong community of mentorship and the people at Reach that make this mentorship possible. So I'm going to start off with my team. Of course, these are the most impactful people to me personally in the Reach experience. So these are the people I'm actually completing my research with. So to briefly introduce them to you, so Sarah on the left, she's a major in international business and strategy. Andrea at the top is a double major in human geography and diaspora and international studies. And then Tolu on the right is a PhD student in global health, in health service research. And finally, we have our faculty mentor, Erica, who's a global public health expert and also holds various titles at U of T, which I won't go into because that'll take too long, I think, to go through. But the impact for me about working with these people is that I get to learn from both their academic backgrounds and their personal experiences on a weekly basis when I meet with them to discuss our research. And this has contributed to my growth personally, but also I think to the quality of the research, and really strongly aligns with one of my values, which is like interdisciplinarity. So to give you some examples of how this has happened in practice, Sarah is an avid case competitor. So she provides our team with the frameworks that we've been using to analyze the information that's been generated about the businesses in our research. So Andrea, she has experience working directly with underserved communities in a Latin American context through a nonprofit that she started in Peru. And so her role has really been to hold us accountable to the communities that we're hoping to serve through our research and checking our assumptions about them. And then Tolu, being a PhD student, has lots of research experience under her belt. And so she's always there to support us, filling in the gaps in our understanding for the team in the research process. So the research team, I think, is like kind of the first point I want to bring to you all. Like, these people will change the way that you see the world, and will always be teaching you, and you'll always be learning from them. Next slide, please. So another thing I wanted to talk about in terms of what I found really valuable about Reach, and something I actually didn't anticipate would be a part of this experience, is career development. So we had access to an optional career offboarding series as a part of our training at Reach. And myself, being someone who has absolutely no idea what I want to do in terms of my future career, I definitely opted in. And through this program, I had access to Gloria, who is on the slide, and she's a career coach. And she, through a workshop series, helped us to learn how to articulate our career story, identify strengths, set compassionate goals. So on the slide, it's very hard to see. You're not supposed to actually read it, but this is like part of the workbook that I did through one of her workshops. And the impact of this on my career development is that, luckily for me, I was completing her workshops at the same time that I was applying and interviewing for my PAY position. And through these workshops, I had really good practice on being able to talk about the things that make me unique and make me a strong candidate for jobs. And actually, after I did land a PUI, her and I had the opportunity to have a one-on-one coaching call where she really helped me to think about ways that I could make the most out of my PUI. So now, as a result of this career offboarding series, I have a whole plan for what I'm going to be doing during my PUI in order to make the most of that experience. So for that, I'm really grateful to the Reach program. Next slide, please. And then another point that I was asked to talk about is why you might want to participate as an engineering student. So I think there's a lot with respect to the social impact that I think Ahmed had talked about already. So I kind of want to talk about maybe a part that you wouldn't anticipate being one of the benefits. But Maren earlier spoke on the fact that we have team performance coaches. So as engineering students, we do a lot of teamwork. I imagine many of you can relate with having bad team experiences. For me, I definitely know that's been the case in the past. Like, sometimes I thought about teamwork as being like just thinking about miscommunication and wasted time. And before Reach, my idea of teamwork was really like, sometimes it's good, but most of the times it's bad. But Jason, our team performance coach, so for like my team, which is like the Team Mexico, he actually works with us to help us set up the processes that allow everyone on our team to contribute from their best selves and make spaces that are really productive and collaborative. And so I think, actually, I know as a result of this team performance coaching, this team, working with this team has undoubtedly been the best team experience I've ever had to date. And the impact of this is that I've been trying to apply these learnings outside of Reach. So for example, this semester for my schoolwork, I came to every single team meeting with a meeting agenda, with action items, and it's really helped me to be able to like make the teamwork outside of Reach a little bit less stressful. Anyways, the team performance coaching is probably one of my favorite things about Reach, and I'm just really interested in how teams work and how to maximize them. Okay, next slide. So hopefully by now, you're convinced from everything that you've heard today that this is an experience that will really contribute to your growth as a person, as a researcher in your career, and you want to apply. So here are some application tips from me that will hopefully help you to be successful in your application. The first tip I want to share with you is to tell a story. This is like a skill I've recently been obsessing over, and I think it's really, really cool how telling your personal story can impact people. So I kind of tried to do a little bit in the intro, but we only have 10 minutes. I really think if you tell your story, it's going to help you with everything below that I'm going to mention. So in this story, another tip I would say is to center your personal values. The point of telling your story, like where you're coming from, how this has shaped the way you see your world, is because it gives the context for that values. And then you can use those values to actually answer the questions that will be in the application. One thing I would suggest when you're centering your values in your application is to actually look at Reach's values on their website and see how your values align with theirs in order to show that you're a good fit. Third, I advise you to reflect and ideate on your unique selling point. So unique selling point is like, what about you personally makes you stand out from everyone else who's applying? This is probably also going to be related to your story and your values. And again, bonus points if you can go and read on what Reach values and what they're looking for in their researchers and shape your unique selling point to address Reach's needs. Fourth, I would suggest that you utilize your resources. By this, I mean, you can go through U of T and find people that will help you tailor your application to whatever you're applying for. So when I was applying for Reach, I actually got someone at one of U of T's career centers, I forget which one, to read over my resume and help me like match it best to what Reach was looking for. Then fifth, I would say, is to practice confidence. So to be very honest, I was very, very intimidated when I was applying for this because there's a lot of very successful, let's say, people at Reach, people who've done a lot of things. But I really believe that confidence is a skill that you can practice. And so I encourage you to try to practice this in whichever way you know best to. It's really, really important that you go into, for example, your interviews, your applications with confidence that you deserve and you can contribute to this experience. Because if you believe in yourself through that confidence, everyone at Reach will also believe that you have what it takes. So next slide, please. So that's it on my end. What I shared right now today was really just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many other parts. I haven't even talked to you about my research. Let's just start with that. So many other things that I could share about this experience. So I did want to encourage you, if you have questions and you want kind of like the student experience, I'm so more than happy to connect. You can send me an email. It's just right there. You can also use my Toronto email too. And then my LinkedIn is just my name. So just feel free to reach out. I'd love to chat to help you figure out if this is the program for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. It's true. There's so much that we can talk about and so much that we need to cover. So I'm just mindful of time. We have 10 minutes, but I know I only had one question come in, and Natalie has also generously asked for, is willing to answer questions. So I'll go over this next step because a lot of it is online, but just quickly go over it so that we can have some opportunity here. So just in terms of eligibility, anyone at U of T who's enrolled in a degree program and next year it is eligible. So you can be a part-time or full-time, you just need to be a student at U of T. And we've covered some of this. This is all on our website. So these are the traits that we've seen is an ideal Reach candidate. And you can find those as well. These are the traits that we're trying to develop in terms of global impact and global competencies. So the application process also clearly outlined on our website in the how to apply section. It's an online link, and in it we do ask in a single PDF to upload these documents. One includes a resume, just 2 pages that just kind of gives highlights, your unofficial transcript. So if you are a new U of T student and you haven't been at U of T for too long, just send us a copy of your transcript in your enrolled courses, even if there's no grades yet, or and then you can send the submitted grades afterwards. And an annotated transcript involves just sometimes there's different stories. We can tell people's preferences and values through the courses that they've taken. So we ask that you select 5 courses from your transcript that will best reflect who you are. So maybe this is a place where, as Natalie shared, you share your story, share your values with us. And then we've added a new co-curricular activity list. And this is partly to address the fact that I know everyone is very busy and involved in so many activities on campus, but as Natalie shared, there's an intensity to this, and there's also a very involved process. And we just want to have a sense of what people are engaged in and to be able to assess in that way. And then we have 4 short answer questions that are directly on our online application that is related to kind of the skill sets that you will be exposed to. And after the application closes on April 24th, there will be those that are successful will be invited to up to 3 rounds of interviews. And our interview dates are between May and June. And those are also posted on our website. So it closes midnight, just before midnight on April 24th. So if you're considering, you still have some time to submit. We do have an application workshop where much more details. If you're really interested in it, you can check us out, join us next week from 12 to 1:30. We've got 2 other students who will go into much more depth into the application process and details. And so the other important information is what happens when you're selected. And it is a long, and as Maren alluded to, you can start as soon as July. And so that critical pathway of once the cohort is selected, there is a whole series of activities over the summer, from orientation sessions to training camps. And then when school starts, teams are formed and the research process. So all of that we've outlined in the Reach research process, so that you have a sense of what to expect and what the timelines are. So I will end there and take some questions here from the audience. So our first question that we received is asking, how do PhD students typically incorporate or balance their research that they do with Reach and their thesis research? So I guess that could be as well master's level. And I can quickly answer to that. I know that, Natalie's team has a PhD student. We've actually have 3 this year. And we have a good mix of undergrad and graduate, and then PhD students are a smaller portion. But they typically are motivated because they want the interdisciplinary experience, and they want to do research in a new setting and new skill set. So if they're just working within quantitative, this allows them to also learn qualitative or mixed methods. So there is time commitment in which students have to balance all of their academic, responsibilities, whether that's a PhD thesis or whether that's just regular coursework. So it's a matter of time management, and it often doesn't overlap. Like the thesis research does not often overlap with Reach research. So I wouldn't say there's a conflict in there. Our next question is, Mary, maybe you want to answer this. How many researchers are accepted each year?
Yes, absolutely. So each year we have 8 actually this coming year, and last year we had 18. So we typically accept between 32 and 34 so students for the cohort, and the teams are composed of typically around 4 students. Sometimes we have 4, sometimes we have 5. It just depends a little bit on the nature of the project, but an average and typical year, we would see about 32 students, 4 students per team.
Great, thank you. Our next question here is, do you need to be in Toronto for the summer for this opportunity? It's a good question. It's a little before our time. We have been working virtually, and then last summer, and then during the school year, once restrictions were lifted, we were doing everything hybrid because some of our students were in faculties in which they were still virtual. So we're at Monk, and we have classrooms that allowed for hybrid participation. So somewhere between there, we will have capacity, and that won't be clear to us until we get closer to seeing what happens. But that can be assessed in a one-to-one situation. I guess we have 5 minutes here, and I wanted to ask, is there any other questions that anyone would like to ask live? One person. Natalie, can you actually, while I have the opportunity, why did you want to apply as an engineer? Like, I know you touch on your personal values, but now that you are in the program, how much of your engineering do you bring into your work, and is it what you expected?
Okay, so in response to the first question, I think as an engineering student, I learn a lot about technical work and how to, approach a problem and solve it. But I think the social impact and the human of engineering is really lacking. It's actually what also motivated me to undertake like the minors that I'm taking. So, and plus my value of interdisciplinarity. So that's really what motivated me to apply as an engineering student. I think engineers have a lot to learn from other disciplines, just like other disciplines can learn from engineering. So there's that reciprocity in learning. And then what was your second question, Moni?
Did it meet your expectations? Like,
oh yeah, I think so. I didn't really come into the program expecting to do engineering work, if that makes sense. I'm not doing any engineering work really. I'm studying like family business models. But that just like might be a reflection of the case study I chose to work on. I think other case studies might have like lend themselves greater to do kind of the stuff that you would do in your coursework. So personally, I didn't come in with those expectations, but I don't think like not doing engineering work has decreased the value for me at all.
Yeah, one of our common questions is the time commitment question. So, students are wondering how much of my time will this take? And I think as a student, can you share a little bit of like how much time?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this because I anticipated this would come up. I'd say like on a busier week, I spend about 5-ish hours on Reach. So it doesn't seem like a lot, but I do think there's a lot of value in having the time available in case something comes up. And also just to take advantage of all the opportunities that like Reach provides. So like coming into the program, I knew I really wanted to focus on Reach. And so I pretty much don't have any other extracurriculars outside of this. But as a result of that, for example, I've been able to really like make the most out of some of the extra opportunities that I talked about that we have available to us. So for example, one of the things I didn't talk about, which I would have loved to, because it's also one of my favorite parts, they're all my favorite parts, is the skills development workshops that happen hybridly. I really, really enjoyed those. And because I have that extra time, I'm not overcommitted right now. I've been able to kind of attend everyone. So it like compared to some other extracurriculars, I don't think it necessarily like rivals some like the amount of time I spend, but I do think if you want to really be present in the program, you need to like reflect on if you're overcommitting by doing too much going into it. That being said, I will say like busier times, it is more time. So for example, when we were submitting our research ethics board approval, I was the lead on that. And that week I was spending a lot of time on that document. But in general, if your team is very organized, I think it's not, I would say like 5-ish hours.
Okay, that's great. Ahmed, any last words?
I think Reach is probably, I teach a course, I run the capstone program, I do a lot here at CGen, and yet still I make time for Reach because it's one of the most interesting, exciting things that take place here on campus. I think it's a great opportunity for students. If you're thinking about your career and if you're thinking about building your network, this is probably, the best opportunity on campus for that. And I always tell students, if you're gonna sacrifice, 0.1 or 0.2 or even half a GPA point because you're doing an extracurricular activity like Reach, this one is very much worth it because of the incredible skills development and career development and network that you develop. So definitely, feel free to reach out to any of us and we'll be happy to take your questions, and hopefully we will be able to see you at the symposium this year.
Yes, absolutely. So I will wrap up here. I know one of the questions, the last question I'll answer is how many applications do we get? And to date, in the last 2 years, we've had about 200. And so we don't know what will come in this year, maybe the same, maybe more, but that's the answer that we can provide. So I just wanted to end the session by really thanking Natalie and Ahmed and Maren and for me, I always get re-inspired by hearing directly from those that are really involved in contributing to the research. You know, as someone that always sees so many different parts of it, it's really nice to hear the feedback of how the program is making an impact and the value of it from someone who is a user and participant. So and someone who that is so busy, like Ahmed, mentoring so many projects, is so involved and dedicated, and it is all volunteer. It's a co-curricular activity. The faculty volunteer their time. Students are giving up their co-curricular time, and so we really know that we're looking for those that are really committed and are willing to align with the mission of Reach. And so I hope that's you somewhere out there. We will have the recording available, and so if you have more questions, all of us are available to answer, and we look forward to receiving your applications by April 24th. Thank you, everyone.